Hey everybody, Shoebox Legends here. Thanks for joining me today for yet another video response episode. I feel like there's been a ton of these going around recently on the channels that I subscribe to, which I absolutely love. I think they're just an awesome way to just spend more time with your cards and collection, spend more time enjoying what you have and thinking about the cards in a different light versus always looking to buy something new. And wanted to do this latest one, which is going out to my hobby buddy Joe over at 4SoftCorners. This is a channel that I found out about, I think, shortly after he started. In the summer, he had maybe commented on a video of mine, and as I usually do, if I get a comment from someone that I'm not too familiar with, I'll go check to see if they have any content, and in doing so, found Joe and his awesome channel. For those of you who don't know him, definitely check the link below. Head over, give him a sub, or at least watch a video and comment and introduce yourself. He is truly one of the good guys in the hobby, just a genuine nice guy who is a true collector, loves vintage, loves cards in any condition. And that's kind of what leads us to the video response. So Joe recently crossed the 100 sub milestone. Major congrats, and certainly very well deserved. I think you'll be at 200 in no time. And to celebrate, what he wants to see for a VR or hear about is a little bit of a discussion on what your requirements are for condition when you're buying cards. And if you have any kind of lines in the sand or a point of no return or things that just, drive you nuts. He just wants you to talk about it a little bit. And I thought the way that I would approach this, I hope this doesn't go too long, but I'm going to use this as an opportunity to show some cards and to tell a story of how my mindset towards collecting changed, maybe like quite a while back now, but a few years after I got into the hobby. And it was really a shift in mindset that kind of like opened up a whole new world of the hobby to me. And so let me explain. So when I got back into sports cards as an adult, it was like late in 2007. I was about 25, had just turned 25 years old, was a little bit kind of finally settled, just bought a house or was about to, and had a little bit of, extra money at my disposal for the first time, really as an adult. Had spent a lot of years saving for a house and other things like in my early 20s, and got back into the hobby, rediscovered baseball cards, but I didn't really know how to collect or, a lot had changed in the 10 plus years that I had been out of the hobby. Didn't really do anything with cards for like a decade there while I was getting through high school and college and kind of getting situated. So I was learning kind of all over again. Like it was a whole different ball game than it was in the mid 90s when I hung them up for the first time. But pretty early on, I discovered graded cards, and I almost can't really explain why, because I didn't have any other friends that were collectors at the time, but I just realized they were for me. I really liked the idea of a graded, encapsulated, authenticated card, and I started kind of buying some of these with my extra money, my free time. And unfortunately, the decision I made early on that kind of I wish I hadn't, although I did correct it, which we'll talk about, is I have a little bit of like, a desire to organize, or maybe like, I don't want to offend anyone by saying it, but like mild OCD, where I really need organization and categorization. I think it's a big part of why I enjoy the sports card hobby. So I spent time thinking about how I wanted to approach graded cards. And what I came up with at the time is I wanted to get a grade that was one number higher than the decade that I was looking at the card in. And I'll explain this with some cards. So here's the first one we're going to look at. This is an 81 Topps Nolan Ryan that I bought forever ago. Honestly, may have been 2007 or 2008. But what I reason to myself is I considered anything 1980 or newer to be a modern card or a non-vintage card. And I knew early on I didn't want to pay for a 10 when a 9 was mint. It's like, why do I need better than mint? Like when I left the hobby in the mid 90s, like mint was what you were striving for. Like I wasn't aware there was anything beyond mint. I thought that was it. So I'm like, well, I'm just going to buy 9s for my modern cards because I just want mint cards. And so then I started working backwards. Like, okay, well, if anything 1980 and newer needs to be a 9, then anything that I buy from the 70s on the graded card front, or similar condition-wise, if I was buying raw, I'd want to be about an 8. So again, one digit up from the decade we're talking about. If we're talking 70s, I want an 8. in my card. And so here's an example of that, Reggie Jackson, that again was kind of following my rules. I think I bought this one more recently, but I just took it out to kind of prove the point of where I'm going with this story. So continue on down the list. If I bought a card from the 60s, I wanted it to be a 7. From the 50s, I wanted it to be a 6. 40s, a 5. 30s, a 4. 20s, a 3, blah, 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 all the way back to, I guess eventually when I got to like T206 or tobacco cards, I'd be okay with a 1 or, anything below that. Well, those of you who have been in the hobby a while or that collect graded cards are, probably snickering right now because you're realizing the folly of my early ways, as I say it here, but I just didn't know any better at the time. I was really just feeling the hobby out. And to me, that was like an organized OCD type way where the numbers lined up and made sense. And it helped me narrow my search when I was looking for a particular card. But so I went on like that for maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years. Again, I didn't have really any hobby friends or like a social element other than that. I had started a blog, a sports card blog, but there really weren't any graded card collectors in the blogging community. It was almost like looked down on. Like, why would you grade your cards? That's a waste of money or silly. So I was kind of operating in a vacuum. But I don't know what took it, me so long to come to the realization that like running with these requirements was really just preventing me from owning like a lot of the best cards that I wanted to own, and it could happen in a couple different ways. I would, maybe I would never end up with a Mickey Mantle card from the 60s because I just, while I could possibly afford those, I couldn't afford them in a PSA 7. Even back then, they were a few $100s in a 7, and I was a 25-year-old kid. And then the other problem was, I was, by buying the grade more so than the card, I ended up with some cards like this. Now, I'm not knocking this card at all. This is really awesome Ted Williams from the first ever All-Star subset, which came in the 58 Topps release. The surface is clean, the image is great, like, yada, yada. But it's way off center, like enough so that it bugs me. But at the time, I was just like, oh, that's a 6. And PSA says it's a 6. So I'm going to go after that card because it matches my number scheme. And I was at that point, letting the number on the flip kind of dictate my purchases. And it's fine because I've done well, selling off a lot of those. But I did end up with some cards like this Ted Williams during that run where, if I look at them today, I'm not really thrilled. And I'd rather find this Ted Williams in a PSA 4 that's better centered, or even a 3 that's, better centered. So I had that watershed moment 2 or 3 years in, like, I need to cut this out and I need to just start ignoring the grade that is on the flip and picking out the cards that I like because I actually like the cards. And I know that sounds really silly, but I had kind of got like trapped myself in this mental game of sticking to my grade, for the assigned decade. And when I finally just came to the realization that like I didn't need to be that rule driven in my collecting, it really just like, it just opened up a whole nother world to me. And I've been able to pick up cards since then that I wouldn't be able to afford otherwise. I mean, I have numerous playing era Mickey Mantles now and Hank Aaron's and just, Willie Mays, like dream cards that, I never thought I would own as a kid. And I never thought I would own even when I first got back in as an adult because I just had those blinders on for the grade. And now, like, I'll pick up a card like this, no questions asked. This is a PSA 1 Kiki Kyler from Diamond Stars, 1935. Shane from 2009 or something would be like, oh, I can't buy that. It's got to be a PSA 4. I don't want that one. But now it's like I have the freedom to do this. I've just gotten rid of that restriction, that mental restriction that I had. And the reason this one has a 1, there's a little pinhole right in his cap here, if you can see it. But it's right at the tip of his cap where it doesn't really stick out on the image. I bet you wouldn't even see it if I hadn't just pointed it out to you. It does come through the back. You can just make it out next to the A there in Diamond Stars. But like, this is fantastic. I don't need a better Diamond Stars Kiki Kyler card than that. And if I held out for one that met my grading scheme, I would just never own this card. That's the reality. And so I guess, I've been rambling on for 10 minutes here, but I hope it, made some sense. And I've even picked up cards like this one. Check this card out. This is It's got 4SoftCorners. Shout out to Joe. It is wrinkled. It looks like it's actually been folded in half at some point and probably run over by a truck. Amazingly, there's no paper loss on the back, but like, I'll buy a card like this now because it's the way I can afford this card. Or maybe some cards like this are so rare, you're just not going to find an example in the condition that you're waiting for. And you can really limit yourself and limit your enjoyment of the hobby. In my experience, this is one man's opinion, if you impose too many rules on your own collecting. And it was a great learning experience for me. I'm glad that I learned the lesson relatively early on, just a year or two back into the hobby before I had spent, too much of my hard-earned money on, OC cards and stuff that I didn't really end up liking too much. So I'm glad that I learned the lesson. I learned it myself through experience. And my advice on this front would be, within reason, just don't limit yourself. Obviously, try to have some focus, which I'm not very good at, but if your focus is vintage baseball or Willie Mays or Roberto Clemente or figure skating cards, whatever it is, try to just enjoy it and remind yourself that it's about having fun, and don't create too many mental roadblocks and barriers that are ultimately going to kind of inhibit your ability to enjoy the hobby. So short answer, that's the long answer. Short answer would be, I'm really open to almost any condition now, depending on all of the other variables related to that card. Overall visual appeal, how expensive the card is, and whether I can even afford it in a better condition, things like that. Getting a bargain because a card has a low grade. One of my favorite things to do now in the hobby is seek out cards that have a low grade, but a visual appeal that is much higher than the grade, sort of like this Kiki Kyler. And if you've watched my channel with any frequency, over the last year or two, you've probably seen a lot of examples of that. I really enjoy the hunt of finding low-grade cards that look nice. So, Joe, that is my VR. I'm going to cut it here since I really feel like I've been rambling more than usual here for 12 minutes. I hope this qualifies, and either way, I certainly congratulate you again, sir, on well-earned 100 subs. And to everybody else, thanks for sticking it out for so much of my gabbing. If you have any opinions on this, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. And if you have a channel and you create content, I would love it even more if you would create a VR and I could listen to and see some of your observations on this front. I think it's a really good topic that Joe has chosen here, and really been enjoying the responses that I've seen so far. So thanks, everybody. We'll cut it here short of 13 minutes, and I will certainly be back in the very near future with some more sports card content, as always. And until then, keep enjoying the hobby.